Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our PMI Montgomery County chapter's November monthly virtual and dinner meeting. The past 2 months, our president, Mr. Charlie Geis, has stressed the importance of at least offering a face-to-face offering in a safe and comfortable space for our members. That's been successful. We're back at Normandy Farm Restaurant tonight. And our guest speaker, Mr. Lee Lambert's joining us from his residence in Ohio. So with the virtual collaboration tools, this gives us the opportunity to be a little bit more diverse with how we do our offerings. For our longtime members in our 16-year history, November is our member appreciation month out of the year. Traditionally, that's always been a free dinner at the Normandy Farm facility with filet mignon and crab cakes, and we're again offering that today. So even with the COVID restrictions on how we operate business and offer value to our members, it's a different type of member appreciation, but we appreciate all our members. Mr. Geis's motto is our chapter prides itself on being all about the members. We want to offer you as much value for your $20 a year membership dues, and we take pride in offering that. And today is also November 5th, which is International Project Management Day. I think the project and program management profession and industry has become more essential throughout the entire world with the skills that you've learned for PPM throughout your career so far. Those skills can be taken anywhere in the world as long as you get caught up on the language barriers. Okay, just like we're still in business and trying to do our best to offer value to you as members, our education partners are also doing amazing things. Mostly with virtual offerings. Our friends Lisa and David from Leadership Techniques are continuing to offer great virtual education offerings, including project management professional certification prep. We're all of the understanding that the exam is going to be changing next year and probably go through changes every couple of years as our industry modifies. So we have great exam preparations with Leadership Techniques. Mr. Joe Liani and Project Management Experts does a great job. Our friends at Montgomery College, who are 2019 Vendor of the Year Award winners, as well as Mr. Carl Pritchard from Pritchard Management Associates. And in good timing, Lambert Consulting Group has been one of the leaders of project management education and training for the last 20 plus years as project management's evolved in the 21st century. And we're happy to have Mr. Lee Lambert as our featured speaker this evening. He's the founder, president, and CEO of his own consulting group, which offers both training to project managers of all ages and sizes, as well as to companies for more strategic alignment of their program and project management goals. Mr. Lambert's one of only 78 PMI members to receive the PMI Fellow Award. That's their highest and most prestigious individual award that's annually awarded at their PMI Global Congress meetings. He received that recognition in 2009. With this presentation, Mr. Lambert succeeded our good friend Carl Pritchard as our most presented member of our chapter. This is his 11th presentation in our 16-year history. So we take pride and appreciate his friendship and everything he's done for the chapter. He's credited with the creation of the stealth learning concept. He was instrumental in the creation of the first PMBOK, as well as all the following editions to include the 7th version coming out next year. and he has 50 plus years of experience and the zest and drive for 50 more, assuming his health holds up. So we'll turn it over to Mr. Lambert for his presentation.
Well, thank you. While he gets those slides up, thank you that introduction. I think that was pretty well captured the background at least. And 16 years you guys been in effect. I've been there 11 times to present, and I always come for the filet mignon dinner. That's one meeting I like to make, and I've made a few of those. But that list of sponsors, they're not only competitors in terms of the world of business, but they're really good friends. I know them all really well. We support one another, and I got to tell you, Charlie Guys is I've been in the business a long time. There's over 300 PMI chapters. I visited a lot of them this year, over 30 of them throughout the world. And there's really nobody like Charlie. He's just a one of a kind. And so when I think of the Montgomery County chapter, it's kind of like my second home. The only one I've attended more often than Montgomery County happens to be Phoenix, Arizona. And I think you can understand why that would be. But today I want to really talk to you about some things that have broken loose sort of since Sunil Prashera became our CEO and president, and he really rolled it out big time in last year's Global Symposium in Philadelphia. The title of the things that have caught my eyes, it's called the Project Economy. And he goes through a whole scenario of describing why that term fits. Why, basically, I liked it because it agreed with things I've thought for, gosh, awful not long number of years, and that is that everything is a project, and therefore everyone is a project manager. So we all need to polish our skills in project management, whether it's our paid job or whether it's our unpaid work that we do at home or with volunteer communities or whatever. So when I thought about that, I thought, okay, that's a good idea. Well, then Brightline came off with this idea of strategic design and project delivery, bridging the gap. Uh, they kind of stole my title. That was something I had kind of settled on a long time ago, and this is so important. I think we need to understand in our project management world, if we're at that level, if we're on that down on the working level where we're really doing project work, managing projects and tasks, we need to understand that we don't just do those for the heck of it. I mean, that's just not, we don't just do those to keep you busy during the day. We do those because the theory is, at least, that by conducting and delivering this project, it will add value to the organization. So the reason projects exist is because they support the strategy of the organization, what the organization wants to accomplish. So just to put it in perspective, remember that every year the senior level people, the CIO and CFO and COO and all the C-level people, they go away somewhere in a secluded area where there's usually sun and surf, where they can relax and be more open about the things they want to get accomplished. They're there to do the plan for the next year. And so they go through these processes, and we still, as much as we've tried to break down this so-called silo effect that we have, we still have it too much from my perspective, where every little silo takes care of itself. I think we're still not getting good horizontal integration in our organizations. But the theory is when they go away, they find those key strategic objectives that they want to accomplish in the coming time frame. Usually it's a year in the coming time frame. Things like an objective to increase sales, an objective to increase market share, an objective to reduce costs. I mean, you can go on and on. Those objectives are cited as ways to further the successfulness of the organization. So they wrestle that to the ground. And once they've come up with this list of strategic objectives, then that's when we get close to seeing projects, because as we get strategic objectives, those objectives, just like a rabbit, spawn lots of projects. And those projects then become assigned to us to get done. Well, here's the problem we're having is that we're losing connection with the strategy as we execute our projects. I mean, I think most of us know how to execute a project, but sometimes we lose connection with the strategy. And I've heard people, I've asked people, I've said, why are you doing this project? And they basically look at me like, well, because Bob told me to. Well, that's a disconnect in the strategic alignment of the efforts that are being done at the project level. So the idea is, let's look at this idea of linkage very closely, so that as we manage the project, as we manage the data that's coming in and make management decisions based upon that data, that we're able to assess the impacts on any specific strategic objective that this particular project supports. We need to give our senior level people the kind of information that enables them to make much more comprehensive decisions about what we should do with our various projects. In order to do that, they need to have that linkage described. You know, we're maintaining linkage, as you can see by the data, or we're not, and then we can see what's the impact on the project, which then can be translated to the impact on the organization. And pretty soon it almost starts like you're half intelligent. That's what we want to do. We don't just want a list of projects and we get them all done and we go, well, that was good. Well, yeah, it was, except it didn't do anything for the organization. So we've got to maintain that linkage. That's what my presentation is going to be about tonight. I'm going to put some responsibility on you as project people to do some things to enable the organization to be more effective. I mean, our job is to help the organization be successful. So I'm going to use a couple of examples. Now, some of you may know I haven't worked since 1984. I've been doing what I do now since 1984. But before that, I had a really successful corporate career and learned a heck of a lot. And that's why in 1984 I decided, I should go out and teach other people how to do this effectively. So, but I want to use some examples. I'll name a couple of companies that you'll recognize that I spent time with and learned a lot of stuff. Okay, my first one, and very early in my career, was a company called General Electric. Now I missed Jack Welch by about 3 years. I left GE in 1977, and I think Jack took over some controls around 80, 81. I've never really checked that date, but somewhere around there. I missed Jack. But, Jack has gotten he passed away, unfortunately. Hey, get lots of marks for being a incredible leader. So I've got all his books that I've read, and I could take exception with some of his styles, but nonetheless, he was the guy. So I learned a lot from GE, because GE really built a foundation. Jack then took it to the next level in terms of leadership, but from a project management perspective, GE showed me the way. That's the first one. The second one is a little company that you'll recognize, I'm pretty sure. It's called IBM. Now, IBM, the reason I picked them is because they're IBM. How are you going to argue with IBM? Well, I spent from about 1993 to about 1996, roughly, teaching project management at IBM, and specifically teaching how to pass the PMBOK PMP exam. Okay, so I had to link in reality with those who had to learn how to speak PMI. So that was quite a learning experience, and I got a tremendous amount out of that. particular group was headed up by a lady named Carol Wright, who was one of the best. In fact, she may be the best uh, project management expert I've ever come across. And sadly, the good ones die young. And unfortunately, Carol contracted some cancer and passed away. And so we don't have her anymore, but she was fantastic. I'm going to share some of the things I learned from her as well. Okay, so that's kind of the agenda. Now we're going to take questions at the end. So hold your questions. If you got questions, hell, I got answers. Don't worry about that. So we'll talk, but we'll take those questions at the end. Now, I want to point out to you, next slide, please. I'm sorry. I want to point out to you that one of the things we have to think about, and this is weighing heavy on people's minds. I know it did mine because I'm an old timer. I mean, I not only in chronological age, but in project management. And I did the predictive thing. I mean, that's what I did at GE. GE, a beautiful place. GE would give me what we now call a task order, or we call it a charter in PMI world, a PM charter, and that charter then at the same time they assigned me a team of people to do that job, and I owned those people. They worked for me. So at that time I didn't have to deal with the matrix and the silos and all the frustrations that we have to deal with today in today's multi-project environment, where we got to beg, borrow, and steal enough resources because those senior level people keep approving more projects than we have people, and then holding us accountable for delivery. So this is another area that we can add some value. If we can link projects to strategy, we can also show what projects don't support the strategy. So the predictive method has been around a long time, and it's not going away. Don't get me wrong, but the next hottest, greatest thing, of course, is Agile, which the IT world created. It had been around a while, but not going anywhere. And then in 2001, a group of about 20 extreme programmers gathered together in Snowbird ski resort in Utah. You see, you always got to go to someplace like that to think. To get it straight, you can't do that in your office or Chillicothe, Ohio. You got to go to a ski resort or a beach or somewhere like. So they did. They went to Snowbird, and they wrote what has turned out to be the Agile Manifesto. Now, so you can't say it was an instant success because we're in 2020. It was introduced in 2000, so we're talking 20 years. But over the last 3 or 4, maybe even 5 years, wow, it has taken the world of project management by storm. People are worrying that their all their work they've put in to become PMPs is going to go down the drain as the Scrum Masters take over the world. Well, you know, if it's working, if it's delivering better IT projects faster, cheaper, whatever the variables you want to measure, then why in the world would we ever argue? We've always bitched. I used to say in the early days of my training for George Washington University, I used to say the biggest challenge we face in project management is clarity of requirements. Because if we don't have that when we start, then we're going to keep changing. Well, the Agile says, yeah, no, we know that. We know that. That's what we like that. We want to do it that way. What we have to be able to do is be able to change quickly. So as we begin to evolve, elaborate the scope, we can move to what it is needs to be done to get that scope done. So I just want you to remember, you're still going to have predictive requirements on some projects. You're going to have agile or scrum requirements on other projects, and then you're going to have hybrids that do a little of this and a little of that. So we have to be flexible. I think the winning project manager is one that says, okay, whatever, let me add it, give it to me, I'll take care of it. And so that's what we've got to do. Let's not get locked in on a style. Now, am I an agile advocate? Sure am. I thought about going and getting my agile scrum credential, but then I found out it's not that hard to get. Pay $1,000, sit there for 4 days, next thing you know, you're certified. scrum master. So I didn't think that would be a very fair representation, since I've never run an IT project using Agile in my life. I know I could, and I know I would, but the fact of the matter is, it's a big world out there, and you got to be prepared to deal with it. You can't run from it. You got to take it head on and do the right thing as we get things done. Okay. All right. So next slide. So what I want to look at here is the fact that most of us don't really understand how strategy fits in. We don't know what strategy is. Well, strategy is whatever the boss says it is. If the boss decided that's what we need to do, we can presume that that direction is moving towards the accomplishment of a strategic objective. But here's the thing that we're not doing. And if you don't start doing it, you're just going to have to keep bitching. When you get a charter from someone, I don't care who, when you get a charter from someone, one of the things that should be on the charter, which the ones I've seen lately still do not have it, is what strategic objective does this project support? Now, why doesn't it have it? Well, sometimes the people who give you the project can't answer the question either. So then you got to wonder, well, how much of my leverage am I going to have in getting this project done if nobody even knows it exists? And so we want to force that issue. When you're asked, hey, Lee, we need this, we need it done right away. And you say, well, why? And they say, well, just cause. Well, cause isn't good. I need to know why. Why? What have I got in the way of power? Or have you empowered me to make decisions? So we need to make that linkage. We need to understand, what strategic objective does my project support? Now, if we've got a strategic objective that spawns 5 projects, okay, then we have a portfolio. That's a term you'll probably hear. I congratulate people who get their credentials on LinkedIn, and I've been seeing a few portfolio management credentials come across the last couple of weeks. So we're starting to see some emphasis on portfolio management. It's a big thing. A lot of the software packages, they aren't called project management systems anymore. They're called portfolio management systems. And so if we've got 5 projects in the portfolio, we need to be able to decide, prioritize, if you will, what needs to be done first. So we may find that the project number 4 and 5 are going to get a lot less attention than they might like, because project 1, 2, and 3 are the major contributors to the strategic objective. But if you don't ask the questions, you aren't going to know. So and then at the end, this is what they do. When I interviewed people, what happened? I said, well, at the end, nobody ever told me where it fit. I said, well, did you ask them? Well, no, but they didn't tell me. Well, cry me a river. You got to do it on your own. You got to go after it and make sure you have all the information. You're going to be held accountable. They're not going to take the heat. The management's not going to take the heat. You're going to be held accountable. So why don't you give yourself the most possibilities to be successful? Don't get behind the 8 ball and stay there. Get yourself enough information that you can stay relevant in what it is you're trying to do. Okay, next slide, please. That means you can't just stick your head in the sand and do it. I see so many I talk to so many project managers who, once they get that project charter, there was a saying I wanted to say, but it better not. It's all out. You go all out, okay, to get that project done, and you never pull your head out of the sand to look around and see what the hell's happening around you. What other projects are you impacting? What other projects could make you or help you do your job more effectively? So pull your head out. Take a look at it, tie everything together, make sure you've got linkage of the data. That's what you need to do. Remember, the data doesn't do jack. The only thing data does is facilitate your decision making. So bad data, bad decisions. So it's up to you to get that put in a position that's going to add the most value. Okay, next slide. Now, here's how I want to empower you, because I feel really charitable today. So I want to give you the power to be a successful project manager. And I'm gonna tell you that I've learned how to deal with this. I've learned how important this is, because just as I was talking about the 5 projects being spawned from one strategic objective, well then if these project managers get together and corner the C-level guy, whoever that might be, and start asking questions about prioritization, the answers they're going to get is going to confuse them even more than when they walked in the office, because the boss is going to say, well, they're all priority 1. Well, that's impossible. There can't be 5 priority 1s. There has to be 1 priority 1. And this is one of the things I learned at GE, because decisions cause people to be held accountable. So senior level people don't really want to make the tough decisions most of the time. And so at GE, I was getting ready to leave actually to go to my new job, which was to install project management at a national laboratory. That you want to have some fun working with PhDs on project management. So I was getting ready to go to that job, and they asked me if I'd take a quick look at their business plan for the following year. Now, at that time, they called their strategic objectives, by the way, they called the projects to support those, they called those mission critical. This was back in the old government, when that government terminology was really in vogue. Mission critical. Okay. So they hand me the business plan, which I thought would be fine. I can do that. And so I looked at this, and it was a fairly thick document, and I read down it, and it looks like they have about 25 mission critical projects that they're going to try to execute in the last year, which would have been 1977. So they looked at, and I looked at those, and I started to read them down. The description was really quite good. The scope was really quite good. They had taken a shot at some of the estimates that you'd like to have, and so I read all down those, and I was impressed. I thought to myself, yeah, I was right. This GE knows what they're doing. And then I remembered, and I said to the guy, I said, "What? This looks good, except for I just want to confirm, is the priority of these projects the same as the order that you've written them on this document?" He said, "Oh, no. The prioritization is on the back side, on the second page." So I turned over the second page, and sure enough, there was the prioritization. And project number 1 was priority 1, and project number 2 was priority 1, and project number 3 was priority 1, so down the line to 25. And I just laughed and walked out. He called me, and I said, "Listen, if you want to get serious about this, give me a call." But he said, "I'm getting ready to move out. I'm packing up my stuff. And if you want to get serious, I'll take some time and give you some feedback." He said, okay. So about 2 days later, he called me. He said, we've rethought this whole process, and we'd like you to just get your quick look. This was on Thursday. I'm leaving on a Friday. So I said, okay, let me take a look. So I looked at it, and I could tell the order had been changed. I could see that, by the way, by the things were at top. I remembered that. And so I said, page 2 for the, he said, yeah, page 2. So I turned to page 2, and for the first time, I saw the power of senior level management. They'd really paid attention. They listened to me. I couldn't believe it. And so I looked at it, and sure enough, project number 1 was priority 1. Project number 2 was priority 1A, and project number 3 was 1B, and so on down. They hadn't done a darn thing. And here's the reason why. So you need to be aware of these reasons. It's not always on you to figure this out. You got to be aware that if they're established prioritization, they are accepting accountability. And that's what we want to get. We want to get them accountable, because once we do, you see, what I've done for you is I've empowered you. I've given you the capability of being what I call assertive directive. Because now, if you get 2 resources pulled off to go work on Sally's job, you can go to the boss and say, "Hey, they had to pull Sally off for some other job. I just want to let you know it's going to slip your job by about 3 weeks." And the boss goes, well, we can't slip 3 weeks. We got to have this job. And I said, well, I can't do it with the resources I have. Well, there's a pretty good chance that that guy's going to go to try to get you the resources. So you've empowered yourself, and you're not just talking out your backside. You're talking out your the way that you've identified. Because the first thing the boss is going to say, well, why can't you? Well, because I lost resources, and here's the plan, here's the schedule, here's the impact. And I mean, what I want you to do is create the illusion that you're really intelligent. Because I mean, if you can fool these guys, you'll get the answers that you want. Use the project management basis to get what you need to be successful in your project. Okay, next slide. So what we want to do, what we'd like to do, and I've been talking to people on the LinkedIn. I'm a LinkedIn animal, as some of you probably know, and so I have lots and lots. I mean, this pandemic has been awesome because since I don't do anything, I just sit around talking to my peers on LinkedIn. So when we look at what everybody seems to think is important, and I certainly agree, is that we need, if we're going to have a strategy office, let's call it PMO, because that's what they seem to like call most anything PMO, where multiple projects come together. If we have a strategy office, then our job is to be sure that all the data gets integrated vertically on every project, which is easy to do utilizing some of the tools that we'll talk about later, vertically integrated on the project, but more importantly, because individual projects are just that, individual projects. But as we look at our organization, we have multiple projects sharing like resources. So now Bob may be committed 80% of his time to one project and 70% of his time to another project and 30% of his time. So as soon as we merge that data, we find out that poor Bob is going to work himself to death. And so we have to make management decisions. Okay. Again, this is for the strategy manager. When he starts to see those kinds of products develop and those kinds of problems come about, he has to realize, well, which project do I have to take care of first? Which one's the most important? And I can make some adjustments. Well, when you make some adjustments, that's going to impact other projects. But if you're integrated, if you have an integrated database, then you don't have to guess what the impact's going to be. The machine will tell you. It will tell you what the impact's going to be. Okay. So we want to have that integration so that we have all the parts that work together. Okay. All right. Next slide. This is an important one. This is the one I've probably learned more from this than anything I worked with. The idea of the stakeholder. It's everywhere now. Even I think Harvard Business Review has had an article recently on the importance of stakeholder management. Everywhere I go, I see it. And so in the 5th edition of the PMBOK, almost two editions ago, we added a new chapter called stakeholder management. That was the first new chapter we'd added for quite some time. Now, I'm going to grant you that the chapters, I mean, it could be a lot stronger, and they're working on every time they improve. That they author anew, they improve, and so they're working on it. But the importance is this: in the PMBOK, and any good project manager will tell you, one of the key elements of a project management process is the communications plan. Okay, so the stakeholder management study is an integral part of the communications plan. And so we need to make sure that we incorporate the needs of all the stakeholders so that they're up to speed, so to speak, on what it is that's going on the project. Okay. So what I've created over time, and I actually took this from an article by Randall England. You may know him. He's around a lot. A long time ago, he and Paul Dinsmore, who's also a PMI fellow, but unfortunately he was also dead. They put together, Paul put together a book in 1981 called Managing Organizations by Project. Well, think about that. That's the project economy. That's saying every project needs to be managed for the organizational is good. Okay, so that put that aside. So in all of their books, in everybody's book, any book you pick up to plagiarize stuff from anybody else, and it's kind of incestuous that way, is that we know how important it is to have that communications plan. So what I've done is I've cited 3 levels of stakeholders. So I mean, everybody's not equal. You know that. And so I got 3 levels of stakeholders. The top level is is what I call the control level. That means that individual has some control regarding your project. He can start it, he can authorize it, he can end it, he can slow it down, he can author changes. So he's important. Well, there's only 2 or 3 of those usually who have that kind of power. This is the power position. Well, in project management, you certainly don't want to inundate them with all the minutia, all the inordinate levels of detail that we have available as project managers. So we summarize that and provide them a snapshot that they can decide: do they need to get involved and take action? Are they comfortable with it, and so on? So the senior level, control level, few in number, big in power. Okay. Now you drop down the next level. This is the most numerical, most numerous, and that is everybody that's working on the project. If you got a project team, you got people coming in and out of the project. Anybody that's working on the project becomes what I call an impact or influence stakeholder. So that means what they do may have an impact on or influence the outcome of your project. So everybody on the project is one of these stakeholders. Okay, that's pretty easy to define because you've identified who's responsible for what. And then, of course, you go through the whole communication development of what kind of information do they need, when do they need it, what form and for all of that. We know that. But there's another group that falls into this with them. That is because of the matrix. If it wasn't for the matrix, we wouldn't have this group. We have the matrix. Let's go with engineering. Engineering pool has 20 engineers, okay, of various skill sets, 20 engineers, and he or she has to assign those out to all the projects that need engineers. And so as he or she assigns them, they become by definition one of these stakeholders. And so as the project evolves and things change and he pulls one in and sends another one out or doesn't, it has an impact on the project. We can immediately communicate that. It's the one big happy family effect, if you will. So we're integrating and communicating. Okay. Then there's another level below that you don't know about probably. Most likely people say don't waste time on it. But I'm going to give you just a snapshot of an 11 billion, that's with a big B, example of a project that, had it not identified and recognized and utilized the information stakeholder, it would have been a very costly error. Okay. Now, I was hired to work for a company called Behringer Mannheim in Castleton, Indiana. It's a $1 billion company, wholly owned by the Engelhorn family in Mannheim, Germany. Okay. I was hired because they were in deep trouble. They had controlled the market in their product, which in this case is blood glucose monitoring for diabetics. They had controlled that market until Johnson & Johnson introduced a new product that just started sucking market share away from Behringer Mannheim big time. And so they decided they needed to get a new product out that was better than Johnson & Johnson's. Well, they looked to me to run that project. I didn't know jack about chemistry and electronic meters. I didn't know any of that, but they wanted me to run the project. So that supports my theories of projects. And so they agreed to give me anything I wanted. And so I got everything I wanted and then some. The challenge was that the project was, the normal time to develop and implement a product of this nature is about 3 years. And they had quite a bit of experience to base that on. I was told, after I accepted the job, by the way, I was told they needed it in 18 months. So basically they said, we need you to cut the time in half. Well, I decided I wanted to do that. I took that as a challenge. I wasn't afraid of it. I took it as a challenge. And since I'd been given ultimate authority to do almost anything I wanted, I did. And we formed up a team of people. We set down some rules of operation, and we got after it. And just to make a long story short, we delivered the winning project, if you will. We delivered on their desires in 18 months. I mean, technically it was like a day early, but in 18 months, okay? And that product, and we were obviously a very pleased bunch of people. Well, in order to get that done, and get that shortened, I had to get maximum performance out of people. I carefully selected, especially in chemistry, because it was going to be a new chemistry composition. So I very carefully selected new chemists. They had about 100 chemists. I picked 25, the 25 I thought would be the best. Well, that caused all kinds of hell in the 75 that were left behind. They knew the importance of the job. They wanted to be part of it, on and on and on, crybabies. And so finally I said to my team, we can't have this impacting our project. So I said, what I want you to do to my chemists is every Friday afternoon for the next 4 weeks, I want you to spend at least a couple hours sitting with the non-project chemists, just exchanging information. There's no set objective, no itinerary. I just want to share and get to know each other, share objectives, share information. What are you doing? What are we doing? What's working? What isn't working? So we did that for 4 weeks, and then we said we got to get on with the project. Well, the project delivered, as I said, and so it went back into the marketplace, and it was a huge hit. It was almost an immediate hit, and market share just came pouring back. Okay, and after 3 years of experience with that product. And by the way, that product is still the market leader. This was in 1990. That product is still by far the market leader. I happen to use it. I happen to be diabetic, maybe a little overweight, diabetic. So I use it. So I'm happy with it. And so it was so successful that at the end of 3 years, Roche Labs, you may have heard of Roche. Roche Labs purchased Behringer Mannheim from the Inghorn family for $11 billion. $11 billion, of which I received nothing. But the fact of the matter was, it's to this day one of the best purchases Roche ever made. Their profit margin on that product and their market share on that product is so extensive that they've repaid their 11 billion many times over by now. Okay, so that was a story. Well, here's the part that I wanted to get to, but I had to set you up, is that the chemistry that went to market and that is still well received, was actually developed by the non-project chemists. We were unable, my 25 were unable to get a satisfactory chemistry that didn't interact with some of the other elements of the product until we got the people involved that were what we call information stakeholders. Now, the reason I've chosen information stakeholders is they really don't have a role to play in your project, but they want information. They'd like to have information. They'd like to know what you're doing, what's working, what isn't working. They're trying to learn. It's kind of like an ongoing live closeout report. Okay. And so out of that, not only do the chemists get good information, but the organization gets a higher level performer based on what they learn. So information stakeholder is very important. If you don't have this person identified, you might want to stop and take a look at that. And see if there's some people out there that could benefit. And in my case, we benefited from them as a result of the information stakeholders. So you've got to be open to some of these new concepts. I don't want you to spend too much time planning this whole thing, but if you don't have this baseline in place, you're going to be working at a disadvantage. Okay, next slide. All right, now we get to the fun part. I've been in this business 54 years now, 54. Some of you in this audience haven't even seen 54. Some of you weren't even born when I started doing project management. And so what I've learned over the years is the longer you're in the business, the more tools there are. The fundamental concepts, the basic needs of a project manager have not changed greatly. Okay. So, but what has changed are all the darn tools that you have. You got tools for this and tools for that and dashboards and oh my God. And so pretty soon you got so many tools that if you really try to use all those tools, there's really no time left to do the project. So here's my guidance. Okay. Here's my guidance. I have three things that I demand each project manager have. They need to have a well-developed work breakdown structure. Now remember, the work breakdown structure, the guidance from the PMBOK, is it's a hierarchy of decomposed work scope. In other words, from the highest level to the lowest level, decomposed into smaller and smaller pieces until the rule of thumb is like 80 hours of effort. A little bit small, I think, but that's the rule of thumb. So at 80 hours of effort, so you got just a plethora of work packages down at that level. Well, here's the reason it's so important, because it's vertically integrated. Okay, you've already got the integration piece there. You now look at each of those work packages, and you, based on the scope that you've defined, you identify the resource skill set that's needed. You identify the cost of that resource skill set. You identify the estimated time that resource skill set will take to do that job, and you got your baseline plan. If you do a good work breakdown structure, the baseline plan becomes simple, okay? And you would do that for everyone and then sum it up, okay, to the project level. So number one, WBS, well-defined, well-working hierarchy, WBS. Okay, the BS, those of you, I know some of you in the audience, you're thinking BS. Yeah, it is BS. No, it's not. It's breakdown structure. And so when we look at that, we have to realize if that's a key element, then we want to make sure we do that. Number two is a critical path schedule. Okay, critical path schedule. Now, some of you are going, oh, we got it. And I'll say, well, can I see it? And they'll say, and they'll bring me a Microsoft bar chart. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about an integrated precedent diagram that shows output input relationships and that we can use to identify where the critical path is, meaning no float. They got to be done when we say, and the float paths, which means that's my information. That gives me the prerogative of making moves that don't impact the critical path. If I don't have a critical path schedule, it's guesswork. Any modifications you make, I got to tell you, is guesswork. Now, maybe you'll get lucky, but the fact of the matter is, with a critical path schedule, you can anticipate the impact. You can look at what if scenarios. There's a myriad things you can do to capitalize on the existence of a integrated logic network precedent diagram critical path schedule. Okay. When you go back to work tomorrow, get yours. If you don't have one, what the hell you been doing? So we want to get those things together. And the third one that I'm kind of a stickler on is risk management. You really have to get good at risk management. That's Carl Pritchard. I mean, when I say risk management, now he's moved out of his law. But when I say risk management, if he gets any drift of that, his ears perk up. He just gets excited. Well, he's the man. He's got the message on risk management. You got to do it. If you don't, you're not a good project manager. I don't care if you have a PMP or not. So when I ask somebody, you guys using risk management? Oh yeah. I said, can I see it? They'll bring me up one sheet of paper. I said, what the heck's that? And they said, that's our risk register. And I said, oh, that's good. That's part of this. I said, so it's got all these names on. I said, what do you do with it now? He said, no, nothing. We just keep adding names to keep track of all the risks. I said, you didn't assign anybody to resolve the risk? No, we just list them so we know they're out there. Well, that's not risk management, my friend. So we've got to have those three things: WBS, critical path schedule, risk management plan. Okay. Now, in this picture, and this is intentional, wasn't accidental, I left the most important tool out of the box. I don't want to get in there, get it all scummed up with some of these other tools. I want to keep it pure, and that's common sense. Unfortunately, I don't see enough of that being used in today's projects, so I'm not sure why we've forgotten to use that, but we need to, especially with all this information we have, we need to make good use of it, okay? Skip the next one. Go to the next slide after that, please. There you go. This is my representation of Agile, just to kind of put it in perspective. Agile was, I think these guys were at a rugby game when they came up with the idea of Agile. Because you see what this is what they call a scrum in Agile, where they all get around in a big circle and are hanging on to each other. And someone throws the requirements in the middle, or the ball in the case of rugby, and all of a sudden they're scratching and digging and biting and kicking, and finally the ball squirts out the side. Somebody grabs it and runs as far as he can before they're tackled. Well, think about that. Isn't that Agile? Our requirements are evolving over time. As they get to a certain point, we pick them up and we say, hey, we need to have another scrum. We need to have another scrum. We did 2 sprints. Now we need another scrum. So that's what it is. Now, here's the thing that's causing a lot of PMPs. Now we got 1.2 million PMPs, and that number's growing fast, I'm going to tell you. But we got 1.2 million PMPs, and there are a lot. I get calls every day. Almost every day I get 2, 3, 4 calls. Lee, I got my PMP. I worked so hard to get it, and now it looks like maybe I should put that aside and get my Scrum Master certificate, because they seem to be the driver on these IT projects. And my advice to them is, yeah, I think that's right. You should get your Scrum Master if that's the kind of work you're going to be doing, but don't let your PMP go, because as I told you on the very first or second slide, there's going to be plenty of predictive projects that are going to need people that have the predictive way of doing business. So keep your PMP, get your Scrum Master, because the change is, it's not subtle. The change is the Scrum Master is like king dog, and the rest of us are kind of following along. So there's still an important role for PMPs in the way of communication, improving and modifying communication techniques. But just keep in mind, it's not that complicated. It sounds that way. The reason we're seeing so many complaints is it's impacting people's way of doing things, and people don't like change. But if you can't deal with change, then you're probably in the wrong business. Okay, next slide. If you decide that what we've talked about tonight has some sense, and it'd be good to have the ability of integrating all this information, and you'd really like to move forward with it, then you got a bigger job ahead of you, because you got to convince your bosses. Your bosses think it's a good idea until you tell them it's going to cost them X amount of money to have that capability. Then the endorsement sort of wears a little thinner at that time. So you got to sell the product, so to speak. Sell the idea that with this approach to running projects, we can make better decisions earlier and have a more positive impact on strategic objectives. If I want to deliver projects that impact the success of strategic objectives, being able to do that by having all the prioritization and information and strategic alignment is important. So you got a big selling job to do. Next slide. Last slide before questions, but I want to ask you this. Think about what I've said. Think about what you can do to enhance the role that you play, and add more value to your organization. Remember, don't think of it as a job. Think of it as an opportunity to add value to the organization. Is it reciprocal? In a lot of organizations, it isn't. But cry me a river. Let's do a good job. Let's feel good about what we do. And if we do, then we'll be okay. Well, the reason I put this slide in is I know 2 guys, very good guys. I won't name them by name because you might know one of them, that are so dedicated to the old world of triple constraint, time, scope, cost, time, scope, cost, that's all they focus on. And if they deliver on scope, time, cost, they're success by their definition. And so what I'm saying is, if you deliver scope, time, cost, but you haven't supported a strategic objective, then all you've done is what I call busy work. And so we had this conversation a couple of times, and they'd been reprimanded by their senior management. What, you need to stay linked with the strategy. Don't just go off on your own. Well, they didn't pay much attention, and they both got fired. These are good people. These are senior level people. They both got fired. So, I mean, I'm not threatening you, you're going to get fired. I'm just telling you that that's how important this strategic alignment issue has become. So, if you're not doing it, if you're not asking the questions, if you're not thinking about it, it would behoove you to give some more time to it. Okay, that's all I've got to say tonight. I want to thank Charlie and Scott and Matthew and all of you who attended for sitting and listening to what I have to say. I hope you found it valuable, and we will stick around and answer questions for as long as you like.